Hello, I'm Frederick Regenold. I'd like to read one of my short stories for you. It's from a book titled Note From La Jolla. There's 6 other short stories in the book, along with that one. This story takes place during the Korean War, back in the 1950s. There's scenes in Pensacola, Florida, at the Navy base there, Pearl Harbor Navy base in Hawaii, aboard the battleship New Jersey, and in Japan. Here's the story. Naval Air Station, Pensacola, Florida, January 1951. The only way Cody Macklin gained entrance to the Naval School of Photography is that he was honor man of his recruit training company in boot camp, and he had indicated on a submitted form that he joined the Navy for a career, not for just the customary 4-year hitch. He knew virtually nothing about photography, and his grades in airman school, which followed boot camp, were below average. But his basic motive for enlisting in the Navy was career-oriented, and one of the 13 jobs available to an enlisted man in naval aviation was photographer's mate. If he was going to spend 20 or more years in the Navy, it was definitely the job that had the most appeal. Air traffic controller was his second choice. That involved verbally guiding aircraft in for landings via radio contact. It seemed to Cody that would get boring and repetitious after a few years, and if you made a serious mistake, you'd be responsible for killing one or more people. There were 2 civilian advisors with whom Cody and the other members of his class privately met on 2 different occasions throughout the 3-month duration of the photo school. The advisors would look over the grades of the student and question each about their choice of the 13 jobs available and why they picked it. In both sessions, they advised Cody to put another choice at the top of the 3 he and each student were permitted to make, not to keep photographer's mate at number 1, because it was number 1 on the choices of several other students, and those students were making better grades than he. His response to them was so sincere and convincing that even though one of the other students grew up in a family that owned a photo store, Cody was picked among the 3 students who ended up in the Naval School of Photography. The student with a family background in photography, who also had better grades than Cody, was not one of those 3. He was now on the base at Pensacola, about halfway through the 3-month course in photography. It wasn't easy for him. His Uncle Jack always took the pictures in his family. Cody, as a matter of fact, couldn't remember having snapped any photos at any time. So everything in this course was completely new to him. He had to learn about the chemicals used in developing the film and making prints, as well as how to use cameras like a 4x5 speed graphic, which was in standard use at that time by most news photographers who worked for newspapers. His Uncle Jack would be proud of him. Cody was on his way back to his barracks aboard a base bus when he spotted a guy he knew in high school talking to another guy. Cody got off at the next stop and quickly walked back. It was Bill Quinley, who was in the class ahead of him at Memphis Tech High. Quinley and the other guy were dressed as officers, so Cody was interested in finding out more. Cody didn't know Quinley very well, but they both had a mutual friend with whom they had close ties. The timing was right. As Quinley saw Cody approaching, the guy with whom he was conversing left. "Hey, Cody, how you doing, boy?" Quinley extended his hand. They shook and smiled at each other. "Oh, I was on the bus and spotted you. You're a dadgum officer, huh?" Quinley motioned toward a nearby bench, and they sat. "I'm in the NAVCAD program. They're teaching me how to fly, or at least they're trying to teach me." "Well, it's wonderful." Cody was dressed in blue denim, which is what enlisted men could wear as long as they stayed on the base. It was the enlisted man's work uniform. "I know your mom's proud of you. She works at Memphis Light, Gas, and Water Division, where my mother works." "Yeah, I remember. What about you? What the heck are you doing here?" "Well, I'm in photo school. It's a coincidence that a lieutenant, who's one of my advisors, told me if I go to night school and get a couple of more college credits, I can qualify for NAVCAD. He said he'd recommend me. What do you think? Should I?" Cody knew his answer would be affirmative. Quinley looked hard and deeply into Cody's eyes and took a long pause. "I think you should tell him you appreciate his interest, but you prefer to be a photographer." Cody was more than surprised. "Really? Well, it's an opportunity to become an officer, and I signed up to make a career of it. It's an opportunity to get your ass shot down over North Korea and never be heard from again. I don't think your mother would be too happy about that. Photography sounds like a pretty good career to me." "Damn, you sound serious." And Cody sounded serious too. "Why do you say that?" "The truth is, Cody, the Red Chinese have Russian fighter planes superior to ours. A lot of our guys are being shot down over there. Frankly, I'm scared, but I'm in it. I'm almost finished here in basic. Then I'll go to Corpus Christi for advanced training. Then I'll be sent to fly combat missions in Korea against an enemy that's better equipped. Put yourself in my place." He hit Cody on the leg. "Now, based on what you told me, I think I'll stay with photography. And thanks for telling me. I'm sure as hell glad I happened to see you. I would have tried for NAVCAD. What about Ed? I haven't seen him since he graduated." Ed was their mutual friend, who also went to Memphis Tech and was Quinley's classmate. He's starting the NAVCAD program soon. I haven't had a chance to talk to him about it. But you know Ed, he's gung-ho. If I were in your place, Bill, knowing what you know, I'd think of some way to flunk out of training. Hey, I volunteered. I knew what I was getting into. Maybe not as much as I know now. But it's a war. and I have too much pride to do that. Cody didn't remember much about the rest of their conversation. They doubted they'd be able to see each other again on the base. They wished each other the best of luck and parted. Cody waited for the next bus and returned to his barracks, preoccupied with what Bill Quinley had told him regarding the superiority of the fighter planes the North Koreans were flying. 2 days later, Cody made a point of seeing his advisor, the lieutenant, and told him he thought over the NAVCAD possibility and decided to stick with photography. A few weeks later, Cody's class was graduating. There were 26 in his class, including one Marine and one Wave, the latter a female sailor. Cody graduated third from the bottom of his class. Only the Marine and the Wave were below him. There was an important meeting of his class with a couple of their instructors. One of them was a former frogman, a member of UDT, the Underwater Demolition Team, which is now called SEALs. Part of his face showed evidence of plastic surgery, which was needed after a bomb exploded underwater in his proximity. He was a rugged-looking guy anyway. You could just picture him swimming underwater and attaching bombs to enemy ships or bridges. The reason for the meeting was to make assignments, or billets as they were called, to members of Cody's graduating class. The ex-frogman had written a list of the billets on the blackboard in chalk. At the top of the list was something like Com Nav Pac FL-7. Most of the list was in abbreviations. It might as well have been in Greek to photo school graduates. The names of ships were on the list, and also the word Guam, which they figured was the island in the Pacific. The ex-frogman spoke first. "Okay, let me have your attention." His voice was gruff and fit his looks. He had a yard-long ruler in his right hand and used it to point at the subject billet. The billet at the top, he put the tip of the ruler on it, is for combat photography. He emphasized the word combat. You'll be going ashore with Marines to photograph their combat. They'll have rifles. You'll have a camera. This assignment ain't for sissies, but if you're itching to get a taste of what's happening over there and want to be part of it, I need 2 volunteers. Cody was on the front row and immediately turned around and looked at his buddy, Reese Hartford, on the row behind him. Cody already had his hand up in the air. He whispered rather loudly, "Let's go, Reese." Reese's hand flew up. The two of them were told to go to the room next door to get the paperwork started. They were given a 10-day leave and told to report to NAS Alameda near San Francisco at the end of it. Cody went to his hometown, Memphis, and Reese went to his, Marshall, Texas. In 1950, before enlisting in the Navy, Cody and 2 acquaintances drove a dealer's car from Memphis to Oakland, California. They kept the cash receipts and were reimbursed and given a small bonus in Oakland when they turned the car in. Cody searched the classifieds during his leave to see if he could find a similar deal. He did, and phoned Reese to tell him he'd pick him up in Texarkana and they'd go from there. It was a brand new Chrysler sedan, beige. They had to cut their leave a little short in order to have sufficient time to drive the distance. When they reached the southern part of California, they drove through the northern part of L.A. first, then up the coast on Highway 1 via Santa Barbara, Monterey, and Carmel into the San Francisco area. Reese hadn't been on Highway 1, and Cody wanted him to see how scenic it is. They drove the Chrysler to the dealer in Oakland, got their gas money back, plus a nominal payment for delivering the vehicle. After checking in at NAS Alameda, they were sent to a transit barracks for the night and told they'd leave for Barbers Point, Hawaii, on the island of Oahu late the next afternoon. Both had sea bags containing uniforms, other clothing, and personal items. As they approached their departure location, they were surprised to learn they'd be flying to Hawaii on a huge 4-engine seaplane, and the trip would be overnight at around 13 hours. It was a noisy, uncomfortable flight. Neither slept well. Landing in the water aboard the seaplane was a new experience. They had to get into a large motor launch in order to travel from the seaplane to the dock at the base. Cody had an eerie feeling in the launch that he had made this trip before, perhaps in a previous life. It was a beautiful, sunny morning with gigantic clouds and the smell of flowers in the balmy air. He tried to make some sort of connection with his past, but was unable to. From Barbers Point, they rode on the Navy bus to the Pearl Harbor base, where they logged in, and the officer in charge told them they would now be taken in a station wagon to their ship assignment, the battleship New Jersey. Cody spoke up. "Sir, could there be a mistake? Are you sure that's correct? We were told we were part of a Marine unit as combat photographers." "No," the officer pointed to a recited the same billet description that the ex-frogman had written on the blackboard. "You're assigned to the flagship of the 7th Fleet. You'll be on the staff of Admiral Harold Morton, the commander of the 7th Fleet. Probably one of the best billets a photographer could get in the entire Navy. You won't be in ship's company. You're separate from that in what they call the flag, which is the Admiral's staff." Cody and Reese looked at each other but remained silent. When the station wagon pulled up alongside the battleship, they found some words. "Good God," Reese verbally ejected. "This thing's huge." "Yeah, I've seen pictures of battleships, but I didn't realize how big they actually are." Cody was all eyes. The boarding gangplank was a little uphill and not an easy walk with a full sea bag over the shoulder. The other end of it aboard the battleship, they had to salute the officer of the day and report for duty. The OOD then had a sailor guide them to the head of flag personnel, a chief bosun's mate who was noticeably impersonal. He had another sailor show them 2 decks below where their bunks were. Another tricky walk, considering there were ladders, not stairways. They were told after changing their dress white uniforms into their denim work clothes to report to the photo lab, starboard aft on the O2 deck. They found the lab and introduced themselves to a chief petty officer, a petty officer first class, and 2 seamen, all of whom were part of the flag, the admiral's staff. The next day, the New Jersey left Pearl Harbor bound for Yokosuka, Japan, and Tody and Reese found themselves engaged in activities that had nothing to do with photography. They were told to paint some walls called bulkheads in the Navy in other flag quarters of the ship. They were instructed by the chief bosun's mate to get paint from a storeroom that was in the eyes of the ship, the forwardmost part of the ship's bow, near where the 2 anchors are located when the ship is underway. A battleship is almost the length of 3 football playing fields, 887 feet. Reese and Cody had to first get to the main deck, which was made of wood, then walk about a football field and a half past the number 2 and number 1 turrets, both of which housed 3 16-inch 50 caliber Mark 7 guns. Then make their way to the storage room, which was in the narrowest pointed part of the ship's bow, the eyes of the ship. The storage room was 1 deck below the main. It couldn't have been a more beautiful, clearer day. The ocean was rolling with ground swells, and even though the New Jersey was similar to a floating city with nearly 2,000 officers and men aboard, where Cody and Reese were now were sort of like being on an elevator that went up and down, then up again. Cody looked back at the ship, taking in the turrets where those huge guns were, and the bridge he figured the admiral and the ship's captain were. Then he looked ahead at the huge ocean and saw flying fish. He knew without question he was experiencing the thrill of his life. And they both knew the ex-frogman who asked for volunteers to be combat photographers was actually an angel who rewarded them for having the guts to volunteer for combat. Painting bulkheads wasn't all that bad, and it was a lot safer than invading a beach with a unit of Marines as a combat photographer. That night proved to be more of a challenge to their adaptability. The sleeping quarters brought to mind the expression packed like sardines. After 30 minutes of lying on a thin mattress and looking up approximately 4 inches at the bottom of the bunk above him and feeling the rolling motion of the ship, Cody could sense a queasiness creeping up on him. He knew it would only get worse if he stayed there. Clad in undershorts and a t-shirt, He climbed out and looked at the bunk above him. Reese was wide awake. "Hey, let's see if we can go topside and get some fresh air," Cody suggested. "I don't want to puke." "Yeah, I feel the same way," Reese agreed. They slipped on their denim trousers and shoes and made their way to the nearest ladder. 2 levels up, they spotted an open hatch and went through it onto the main wooden deck. It was a moonlit night, and the air was heavenly compared to where they came from. A few yards away, they saw an open space where they could sit on the deck and lean against a sheet of metal. "Oh man, this is great," said Cody. "Maybe we can sit here for a while and get sleepy and not puke." "Somebody will probably come and tell us to go back," replied Reese, "but we can enjoy it for a few minutes." Through the metal they leaned against, they could feel some sort of vibrations or movement. They wondered what it could be this time of night. Seconds later, there was an explosion. Sharp, deafening explosion. Reese and Cody knew they'd been hit directly by enemy fire and that their lives had ended. They blacked out momentarily, but quickly regained consciousness. Looking up and to their right, Cody saw the outlines of 2 5-inch gun barrels protruding toward the ocean. "What the hell are you guys doing out here?" It was an older sailor whose tone of voice evidenced authority. He also wore over-the-head protective earmuffs and didn't wait for a reply. "Get your asses below. You don't have any business out here during gunnery practice." Cody and Reese needed no further proof and were delighted to still be alive. They returned to their bunks and somehow managed to fall asleep without throwing up. The next day or two were spent familiarizing themselves with the photo lab, learning which cameras to use and where the chemicals were to soup the film and make prints. The petty officer first class in charge gave them some practice projects to work on. The rumor, or scuttlebutt in Navy jargon, was that the enemy had 100 fighter planes waiting and planning to attack their ship. The word was that the battleship Missouri, which they were replacing, never had a shot fired at her, but the enemy was planning to blow their ship out of the water. While eating lunch in the mess hall, Cody got acquainted with a boatswain's mate 3rd class, Jim Flowers, who was also a member of the Admiral's staff. He presented something to Cody that was much more uplifting than the enemy aerial attack. Based on the previous visit to Yokosuka, where their ship was now headed, Flowers, a tall, handsome kid, convinced Cody there was an unlimited supply of fantastic girls ashore, and that Japanese girls in general made American girls look sick when it came to sex. They're dainty little ladylike creatures that turn into a tiger once you get them in bed. Flowers' conversation about the subject was so graphic and compelling that Cody got aroused just listening to him. However, at the same time, questioned the veracity of his remarks. Flowers could see the doubt on Cody's face and suggested the two of them should go ashore together on their first visit off, called Liberty in the Navy. Cody enthusiastically agreed. Entering the harbor at Yokosuka aboard the New Jersey was exciting for Cody. He'd never been to a foreign country, and he never entered any harbor aboard any ship anywhere. He stood outside the hatch of the photo lab with the other photographers and watched closely. He learned that he and Jim Flowers both, luckily, had liberty the next day. They had to be back on board ship before midnight. Reese planned to go ashore with 3 other sailors. While standing in line to go ashore the next morning, Flowers explained to Cody they'd be given a pack of condoms. Flowers called them rubbers, and a tube of antibiotics, and to take them and put them in his pocket. Afterward, they got into a large motor launch and proceeded from the anchored ship to the pier. Once on the base, they'd take a bus to the exit where they'd enter the city of Yokosuka as pedestrians. On the bus, the last stop before reaching the main gate was the enlisted men's club. Several sailors got off there. Flowers nudged Cody with his leg. They'll get off, get drunk on beer, and head back to the ship. That's their idea of liberty, dumbasses. A few yards after exiting the main gate on foot, they encountered a cluster of local men standing next to their 3-wheeled vehicles, a version of cycle rickshaws referred to as pedicabs, which could seat 2 customers. Flowers directed Cody to the one of his choice, and they climbed in. Both wore dress white uniforms and looked very neat. Flowers spoke to the smiling cyclist, pointing in the direction he desired for him to take him. Go straight. I'll tell you where. Yes, yes, the man answered, bowing his head slightly, and started pedaling. Overhead, on selected telephone poles, were loudspeakers from which music and singing were blaring. At the moment, some female voices were belting out the Chattanooga Choo-Choo in Japanese. Attempting to override the music volume, the cyclist twisted around and shouted, "Do you want to go Vidy Hill?" No, Flowers insisted and indicated with emotion, "Go straight." Cody was curious. What's Vidy Hill? Flowers chuckled and pointed in that direction. That's where the whorehouses are. We don't want any part of that. He leaned back in his seat. Just relax. Leave everything up to me. 10 minutes later, they left the commercial area and the music and entered a residential section. Flowers told the cyclist to turn at 2 or 3 different intersections as if he knew where he was going. You seem to know where you're going, ventured Cody. Not really. Just want to get away from all the crap and see if we can find some nice girls. You're going to find them riding around on this thing? The disbelief was obvious in Cody's question. Yeah, they're all over the place. You just have to be patient. I told you so. You still don't believe me. He was looking ahead as he spoke. Approximately a block ahead of them, two females were walking in the same direction they were moving. In a matter of seconds, their pedicab was 10 yards behind them. The girls were talking and laughing as they walked. Both wore dresses and had attractive hair. As the pedicab got closer, they both turned to see what was coming. They started giggling. Flowers took over. He told the cyclist to pause while they pulled alongside the females. "Hi, you speak English?" asked Flowers. The one closest spoke. "Little English. You know Japanese?" They started laughing. Both were cute. "Arigato, I know that means thank you." Flowers smiled. The other girl spoke. "Good word." Flowers whispered to Cody, "You like these two? Both look good to me." Cody agreed. "Yeah, okay." Flowers was personable and had a great smile. He was 6'3", and Cody was 6'1.5", and was the quiet type and had nice features, but not as handsome as Flowers. "You want to teach us some Japanese?" Flowers was good with words, and he knew what to say. The closest resumed. "Yes, come, we teach." More giggling. "Oh, that's good." Flowers was grinning now. "We good students," he directed Cody. "Let's go." They got out of the pedicab, and Flowers gave some American currency to the cyclist, who then made a U-turn and was gone. The sailors towered over the girls. "What ship you on?" It was the one who seemed to be in charge. "Boxer." Flowers didn't miss a beat. Cody knew he lied, and probably knew why. She was also the sexiest, with great legs and rather large breasts, the latter attribute being somewhat unusual for Japanese women. Throwing her hands up and imitating flying planes. "Has planes! Yes, drops bombs! Boom, boom!" She was very demonstrative. "Take your pick," Flowers instructed Toadie. Then to the girls. "Yeah, aircraft carrier. I like Boom Boom, but she may not like me." Cody tried to be unselfish. "I grab the other's hand and lead the way. You ask Boom Boom what her name is and grab her hand." Cody was convinced Flowers had done this before and followed his suggestion. "What's your name?" Cody struggled with a smile as he reached down and clutched Boom Boom's delicate, perfectly manicured hand, and was startled when she smiled at him and flashed those Asian eyes. "Mika!" She squeezed his hand. "We go my house. You like it. What's your name?" Following his friend's example, Cody quickly answered, "Joe." "Oh," she giggled. "My friend Joe, too." Flowers and the other girl walked in front of them. Cody didn't know what she meant about friend Joe, too, but he felt he had to converse. "At your house?" No, my friend Joe, his house. He on destroyer. Gone for a week." Cody tensed up suddenly. "Is it okay?" He thought of the possible consequences. "It's fine. He no care. Nice man. We have fun. You like it. I'm good." At this point, Cody wasn't sure about what he'd gotten into, but he preferred it to a whorehouse, unless he got killed. He'd never been to a whorehouse. In fact, He'd never had sexual intercourse, a true virgin. About 50 yards later, Mika pointed to a house on the other side of the street. My house! Nobody there! Flowers and the other girl led the way. The house was on a slope with a steep terrace and steps going up to the porch. It was an attractive two-story structure painted brown. The other couple waited at the door for Mika to use her key and enter. Both sailors were surprised at the interior. Had nice furniture and what they could see was very neat. There was a stairway leading to the upper level. Mika grabbed Cody's hand and pulled him toward a nearby doorway. Come, Joe. This is my room. Cody's surprise continued as he surveyed the bedroom with an impressive king-sized bed covered with an artistically designed oriental spread. Mika promptly shut the bedroom door. They go upstairs. We here. Have fun, okay? She didn't waste any time removing her clothes and revealing a body that took Cody's breath away. Take your uniform off. She yanked off the bedspread and placed it on a nearby chair, then turned and started helping Cody undress. Well, rubber, you have it? He gave her the package that had been given to him. She put it on the bed and continued disrobing him. He was already fully aroused. With her hand, she playfully confirmed what she saw. He was completely nude now. Come, in bed. She indicated for him to climb onto the large bed and lie on his back. With dexterity and evident experience, she hurriedly opened the package of condoms and removed one, skillfully placing it at the proper place, knowingly leaving sufficient space like an expert, and unrolling it downward. Cody watched with fascination while admiring her gorgeous boobs. She then stood over him with her legs apart, bent her body forward, placing one hand on his shoulder, and then assumed the cowgirl position with Cody inside of her. Now, with one of her hands on each of his shoulders, she looked down into his face and grinned approvingly. First time, huh? She pushed herself tightly against him. Yeah, he didn't lie, and wondered how she knew. Feel good? You like? She began moving. No hurry. Go slow, Joe. Have fun. I like it too. I make you feel good. I know how. Cody couldn't resist telling her, I love it. He didn't lie, and decided to leave it all up to Mika. She steadily increased the tempo of her hip movement, and within 10 minutes was going full speed. They both exploded orgasmically. Afterwards, she stayed in command. Disposing of his condom, she led him into the adjoining bathroom, where she showed him how to use the tube of antibiotics, then washed his privates thoroughly. When fully dressed again, she popped the inevitable question. You have $10? Tilting her head quizzically, but without a smile. Cody knew she meant business. Mika had done her part like a pro. Now it was his turn. Oh, sure. He managed to get his wallet from a tight pocket in his pants, opened it, and slipped out a 10 spot. Remembering the exchange rate was 360 yen for $1 American. He also remembered the word Flowers taught him as he handed it to her. Arigato, with a slight bow. Doitashimashite, giggling. She folded it and put it in her bra between her breasts. When she opened her bedroom door, they saw Flowers and the other girl sitting on the living room sofa. Based on their inability to verbally communicate satisfactorily, their goodbyes were brief, and the sailor's next liberty was uncertain, so a future meeting was doubtful. Cody and Flowers, wanting to stretch their legs, decided to walk until they could flag down a pedicab. They told each other what had happened with the girls and agreed their outing had been successful. Flowers wished he had taken the girl he offered Cody, based on what Cody told him. Cody was happy he got Mika, the Boom Boom girl. Once inside the base, they stopped at the enlisted men's club for a burger, fries, and beer before returning to the New Jersey, not the Boxer. They spotted some of their shipmates, already noticeably intoxicated, but Reese wasn't among them. That was the only liberty granted to them during that stay in Yokosuka. 3 days later, the ship departed for North Korean waters. During that trip, there were several gunnery practice drills, including anti-aircraft practice in which a plane pulled a white sleeve at distance behind it, and the New Jersey's anti-aircraft guns shot at the sleeve. The ship soon joined the 7th Fleet as its flagship. There were aircraft carriers, destroyers, and cruisers encircling the New Jersey. Cody and his shipmates felt safer now in case those rumored 100 enemy planes attacked, especially when they saw American planes taking off and landing on the aircraft carriers around them. The extra knowledge about the superiority of the enemy aircraft that Bill Quinley had shared with Cody put a damper on his confidence. He decided to mentally switch subjects and fantasize being in bed with Mika. I wonder if I'll be able to find her again. And if I do, Joe will be there. I'd better forget about her. Otherwise I might get myself killed. Flowers said it was a matter of being patient, and that there were plenty of females all over the place. I didn't really believe him when he first told me. Maybe I should go with him again, and we can take a pedicab to another neighborhood. Or hell, maybe I should go alone. I know the routine now. You just have to strike up a conversation, even though you don't know Japanese. Most of them know enough English to get along. That's what I'll do. That way the only person I have to please is me. A couple of mornings later, when Cody and Reese were standing outside the photo lab after breakfast, which is what they usually did on that time, the chief petty officer came out and told them he heard they were cruising in the Wonsan harbor, that it was enemy territory, and that they should come inside. Come inside? Cody spoke first after the chief re-entered. What the hell are we going to do inside? I thought we were photographers and supposed to take pictures of what's happening. A quick look around confirmed they were moving into a harbor, and most of the other ships in their group had disappeared, mainly the aircraft carriers. First Class Shea was just inside the hatch entrance and overheard Cody. He came out. "I got some film I want you guys to shoot for me." Shea was a middle-aged man who was a Navy Reserve, like most of the men on the New Jersey. You could look at him and tell he wasn't the type who would go on liberty and look for girls like Mika. Taciturn and settled. He probably has a nice wife and 2 or 3 kids in Milwaukee, where he's from. "Come in, I'm going to close the hatch." Reese and Cody were both disgruntled, but had no choice. Shea was over them and had the authority. And in the military, that's all that's necessary, unless you want to be put on report and written up. Shea gave them the roll of film, and they went into the dark room. They'd done it a couple of times before, so they knew the procedure. Prepare the chemicals, turn off the room light, turn on the red safe light, open a roll of 35 millimeter film, and connect it to the metal spool before dragging it, the unrolled film, through the chemical developer. They decided to skip any talk about their feelings because Shea and the other photographers could hear them. The dark room wasn't soundproof. It was at this point the sound of explosions started, some near, some distant. They could feel the concussion as the dark room, and certainly the entire ship, vibrated. Instantly, they knew it wasn't gunfire from the New Jersey. They had never heard anything like this. Shea's voice was loud and clear. He pounded twice on the bulkhead. "The enemy's firing at us. Stay in the dark room. We'll keep you posted." Another explosion, closer. Then they recognized the sound and sensation of their ship's gun returning fire. They could tell the difference between the 5-inch guns and the big 16-inch ones. Fortunately, they had not opened the film yet. There was absolutely nothing Cody and Reese could do but wait and listen. They turned the room light back on and the safe light off, but chose to remain in the dark room as Shea had requested, and hoped to God an enemy shell didn't hit the photo lab or their ship. The sounds from explosions finally stopped, but the ship's firing continued. After what seemed like an hour, the ship's guns went silent. Shea knocked on the bulkhead and told them they could come out now. The chief petty officer, First Class Shea, and the 2 other seamen were in the outer room. The chief spoke. He was from Oklahoma, a trim, dark-haired man, maybe 38, a career Navy man. "We're going to open the hatch now and see what damage there is. I think there is some. I could hear it. Don't touch anything. You might get burned. Be careful where you step. I don't want to have to take any of you to sick bay. I'll try to find out what happened and let you know." First Class Shea didn't budge from his chair. The chief unsecured the hatch bars and carefully pushed the hatch open. One of the other seamen exited slowly and looked around. "There's some damage out here. Take a look." The rest of them went out, remembering what the chief had said about not touching anything. Reese and Cody quickly saw that a horizontal metallic mesh, which contained cork and rope for flotsam in case the ship sank, had been blown upward, apparently from concussion by an enemy shell exploding along the starboard side of New Jersey. It was only about 2 feet from where Cody and Reese had their after-breakfast chat every morning. If they had been standing there, death would have been swift and certain. They both knew that Shay had saved their lives by having them come inside the photo lab and souping some film. They went back in and expressed their gratitude to him. From that moment on, Shay's words carried considerably more weight, and what he did with his private life was totally insignificant. Later, the chief returned and told them the enemy scored a direct hit on the number 1 turret, where 3 of the big 16-inch guns were housed, and the mess cook had been killed by the concussion on the port side of the vessel. There were no details on that. He said the battleship would return to Yokosuka for repairs. Cody wondered if Mika was having sex with Joe. Their ship stayed within sight of the enemy shoreline and hills. One afternoon after lunch, Cody was eating a delicious strawberry sundae on the fantail, the most rear area of the ship's stern. It was a great place to relax and watch albatross follow the ship without hardly moving their outstretched wings. Cody's reverie was interrupted when he spotted American planes dropping napalm on enemy installations. As he watched attentively while chewing on the strawberries, he suddenly felt ashamed. He glanced around at the relative calm of his immediate environment, then back at the planes, literally cooking alive enemy human beings, and realized if he had been born in North Korea, he could very well be there, being burned alive. He wondered if those people being killed really hated the United States, and maybe they were just trapped in their circumstances and unable to escape. This crap is stupid, Cody thought to himself. Some leaders decide they want to invade another country and gain power, and innocent people who are just trying to survive and lead a decent life, are killed. They're gone, man. No more food for them, no more sex, no more love. And what the hell am I doing here? What's all this mean to me? I just want to survive too and be happy. I don't want to kill anybody. Do you hear me, God? I don't want to kill anybody. The next day, Reese took a photo of Cody wearing a helmet and a life jacket and holding a K-20 aerial camera. In the background, some anti-aircraft guns and the barrels of 2 5-inch guns were visible. They occasionally used the K-20 because it produced 4x5 negatives, and the film roll was 200 feet long. Reportedly, it was the camera that captured the pictures of the atomic bomb exploding at Hiroshima. Reese told Cody where and how to stand for a dramatic pose. Cody mailed the print to his mother in Memphis. When the New Jersey anchored in Yokosuka, the word got out they'd be there for a while, and it would take time to repair the number of one turn. Cody saw that it was pretty much ripped open by the explosion. Waiting in line for meals, Cody and Reese saw 10, 12 sailors who looked dazed. They had been transferred off a destroyer and were now being treated for shell shock in the sick bay. Cody hadn't seen Flowers and was somewhat pleased because his Liberty plans didn't include him. He was sure that Flowers would also be relieved that he didn't have to act as a guide for Cody on another pedicab quest and could instead explore the neighborhoods of Yokosuka alone in search for manko, the slang term for what interested most sailors in Japan. In the back of his mind, remembering what Cody had told him, he considered going to Mika's house just to see if Joe was there, but concluded that could be the mistake of his life. Reese didn't have any liberty on the first day it was granted, and Cody made up his mind to go solo. He knew it could be risky, but he was an only child and was accustomed to being alone. When the base bus stopped to let off several sailors at the Enlisted Men's Club, Cody recalled what Flowers had said. He walked through the main gate and kept walking past the group of pedicab cyclists into the main part of town. A Japanese female group was giving their version of Abba Dabba Honeymoon over the loudspeakers, and he walked faster to get away from it. He saw what appeared to be the train station and thought it might be a good place to watch females coming and going while he sat on the bench. He was right. In 15 minutes, he saw a cute girl get off a train and walk in his direction. Wearing a dress and with short hair, she had nice legs and a sexy walk. Using Flowers' technique, he stood and approached her. "Speak English?" he smiled. She stopped and looked up at him, focused her sparkling eyes on his. "I know little but no good. I try." Without wasting a moment, "You like me?" Cody relaxed a bit. Seeing right away he was going in the right direction, he put his hand out to see if she'd hold it. "I like you a lot." She did and giggled like the previous girls. "Can we go somewhere?" he asked. "Hi, yes. You have dollar?" Cody could tell from her inflection in the last sentence that it was a question. He removed $1 from his wallet and gave it to her. "This okay?" She nodded approvingly, took the $1, and went to the ticket window where no one else was in line. After obtaining what she wanted, she motioned for him to follow her. As he approached her, "We go my place. You like? Nice." She led the way onto a boarding ramp. He thought he'd better ask, "How far? Close? Where we go?" He kept his words and sentences simple and short, trying to imitate her style. She took his hand again and looked directly into his eyes. "Little minutes, not far. Train here soon." Cody was completely taken in by her personality. Although she was a total stranger, he could sense an uncommon trust. and wasn't in the least concerned about her being tricked or robbed. He knew, of course, a professional capable of robbery and murder would have that trained ability. So he reminded himself to be fully circumspect. Their train arrived in less than 3 minutes. They boarded, and she led him to a seat for two that faced their intended direction. She came across as the quiet type, not like Mika, who was naturally loquacious. So he knew it was up to him to initiate conversation. "Your place not far, huh?" She had him sit by the window. He didn't see any other Americans in their car. "Little minutes. 10, 15. Kamakura, my city." She pronounced the numbers correctly. He took her hand in his, and she quickly took it away. "No here. One garimasu. My place." He guessed why, and that the word in her language meant please. However, glancing around to see if any of the passengers were watching them, he was surprised to observe that every single one of all the passengers was reading something. No one was looking out the window or at them. Each had a magazine or some form of reading matter in their hands and appeared to be concentrating on it. He felt guilty looking out the window, so he turned his head and eyed his new acquaintance. "Damn, she's so cute. How did I look into this? I don't see anything about her I don't like. Look at those hands and fingernails, and her hair. Beautiful. And her face, the skin, and her facial structure. Her lips and nose are perfect. And I don't even own a camera. My shipmates won't believe me unless I have a photo of us together. A camera is just something else to lose or have stolen. I'd better just pay close attention. I don't really know yet what I've gotten into. It's too good to be true so far." Several minutes later, after 2 or 3 quick stops, Cody turned the other way and saw they were entering another city. "Is Kamakura. I live. No here, but station after." The stop after the next is where they got off. Cody walked beside her, not attempting to hold her hand. She greeted 2 different people, both females, on the way. She stopped in front of a cream-colored wooden 1-story house. "My house. We no go here." An elderly man with a round face and a hairless, shiny scalp came out of the front entrance smoking a cigarette. He grinned and began jabbering in what Cody assumed was Japanese. He didn't understand any of it. The man walked closer to them. "My daddy," she announced. Cody put his hand out to shake his, and the man switched the cigarette to his left hand and shook Cody's with his right. "My name's Cody. Very nice to meet you." The man had a good grip, and Cody had decided to speak regular English with him, even though he figured the man knew none of it. He seemed friendly. He and his daughter continued talking for a short period. Cody suddenly realized he didn't know the girl's name. Made a mental note to learn it when they had privacy. When the father and daughter finished their conversation, she indicated to continue walking as before. They did. "Your name? What is your name?" He put emphasis on the word name, thinking perhaps she might not know the word. With no hesitation. Hiroko. You like? Yeah, pretty. Does it mean something? He supposed she wouldn't know what that meant. Rich. She laughed aloud. But I know rich. No have money. The next stop was 3 blocks away and was a small 3-story hotel. They entered, and Hiroko greeted the middle-aged lady behind the front desk in their language. Cody watched and listened. He could tell that they knew each other. $5. Onegashimasu. Hiroko showed Cody her open palm. He knew he didn't have a $5 bill, but opened his wallet and removed one of the $10 bills and gave it to her. She spoke again to the lady and gave her the 10. The lady opened a drawer and took out some Japanese currency, then gave it to Hiroko, who then gave it to Cody. He slipped the yen into his wallet. The woman escorted them up one flight of steps and down a short hallway to a room. She unlocked the door and motioned for them to enter. She departed swiftly. The room was neat and decently furnished, with an adjoining bathroom. Cody was unsure about what to do next and chose to leave it up to Hiroko. What followed was similar to the scene with Mika. She disrobed, then helped him. A difference was that she got into bed first, then waved him in, and her breasts were smaller. She also was more interested in touching and feeling than Mika had been. She moved slower and more deliberately, seeming to enjoy their closeness as she fingered parts of his body, then tightly embracing him. His face was touching hers. He marveled at the beauty of her Asian eyes. When he started to kiss her, she stopped him. No. Sex only. No kiss. She then fondled him appreciatively, looking closely into his eyes. Cody wanted this to be different. He explored her private parts with his fingers. Hiroko expressed her gratitude with a delicate smile. Cody tried to postpone his climax and make sure he satisfied her. She was very responsive. I like you, Cody. You nice. She climbed on top of him, cowgirl fashion. Cody tested himself to see if he could avoid a climax while permitting Hiroko to satisfy herself. He succeeded. She exploded passionately and came close to kissing him. Then she lay close to him and played with his still aroused member. You on boat? She glided her fingertips creatively. Lying to her was out of the question. New Jersey, battleship. You like? It's okay. I'm happy. But I do not like war. War? Fighting. Killing. I do not like it. He purposely avoided the contraction. She rapidly spouted a sentence or two in her language. I like you, Cody. I see you. She removed her hand from where it had been and gesticulated. More? He was tired of talking the way he had been and had to let it all come out. The problem is I don't know when I'll have liberty. We don't know that. I can only do what I'm permitted to do as far as free time is off the ship. I want to see you again. I like you too. You're very cute and seem to be a nice girl. I guess you do this a lot, but I still think you're a decent person. And I would like to, and you would like to live a different life, but cannot. She understood nothing of what he said, but she was captivated by the sincerity on his face and the tone of his voice. His words had no effect on his own sexual excitement, which was clearly visible. So she put her hand back and continued moving it, interpreting that as a request for more. Cody got on his knees, missionary style. They both climaxed. After cleaning up and dressing, he opened his wallet and asked her, "How much?" $5. He fished out another 10 and gave it to her. "Arigato gozaimasu." She dipped her head politely. She accompanied him back to the Yokosuka train station, and Cody tried his best to communicate with her that he'd meet her tomorrow here at the same time, if he had liberty. Hiroko actually seemed to understand. Cody hoped so, and also that he'd have liberty, and that Hiroko would understand if he didn't. Aboard the New Jersey later, Reese appeared when Cody told him about his new female acquaintance. Reese appeared pleased, but after quizzing him as to how he met her, Reese cautioned him that she could be a street whore who is unconcerned about spreading her VD and possibly is unaware she has it. Cody knew that was coming and realized it was probably true, but he was still happy and anxious when he learned he could have another day of liberty tomorrow. He liked Hiroko's company. He liked everything about her, but wished he had met her in church. The next day, Cody was thrilled to find her waiting at the train station. He really didn't expect it, and had prepared himself emotionally to accept it when he didn't see her. But he did see her. She was there with a huge smile and in a different dress. She looked lovely. Noticing a small sack in Cody's hand, Hiroko inquired what it was. He showed her that he brought 2 packs of Chesterfield cigarettes for her dad and 2 Hershey bars for her. She laughed and applauded. "I no eat candy. My daddy like." "Good. Daddy gets both." Cody smiled and put them back in the sack. "Something else for you." In broken English, she was able to tell him her plan was to return to Kamakura, but after stopping at her place to give the cigarettes and candy to her daddy before going back to the hotel. They would go see the giant Buddha in another part of town and also get something to eat. What could he possibly say to this enchanting creature who had waited for him at the train station except, "Hi"? He knew that meant yes. Her daddy was surprised beyond belief and displayed a smile that wouldn't disappear from his face. He opened one of the Hershey bars right away and started munching on it. They took a car taxi to the giant Buddha statue, which was only about 15 minutes away. The instant Cody saw the monument, he knew this would be a day he'd never forget. He stood frozen and speechless. The size of Buddha overwhelmed him. And when he learned it was constructed in 1252, he was astounded. Looking up into the statue's face, he felt transported to another world, a world of peace that had no napalm bombs or leaders who wanted to rule other countries. Cody and Hiroko spent an hour looking at the impressive Buddha and the exhibits near it, then went to a restaurant of Hiroko's choice. Cody found the food bland and the ball of rice difficult to eat, but he tried, knowing he wouldn't survive long on Japanese cuisine. They returned to that same small hotel, and the woman behind the desk was delighted to see them. She took them to the same room, where what happened with Cody and Hiroko was basically the same as the day before, with one exception. She kissed him passionately. They stayed longer this time. They were more comfortable with each other. They spent more time simply looking into each other's faces and enjoying their togetherness. Each knew how special it was, and the visit to the giant Buddha made it more so. When they parted at the train station in Yokosuka, it was more difficult. Both wanted to say much more than they could because of the language deficiency. She had no telephone where she lived. He didn't know when his next liberty would be. It was almost impossible for them to express these important thoughts to each other. In bed, having sex was simple. No language was necessary. When Cody turned away from Hiroko and walked toward the base entrance, he was frustrated. He was unable to tell this adorable creature he'd met on the other side of the world how he feels about her. He was happy, but sad. The following 10 days were hectic. Liberty was unpredictable. When he finally did get a day off, he went and waited at the train station for 2 hours. He's tempted to get on the train and go to her house, but he realizes he'd probably get lost and get into a lot of trouble. Back on ship, he learns they're returning to North Korean waters, so he can forget about liberty for a while. But he can't forget Hiroko or the giant Buddha. There's more gunnery practice, more seeing American planes dropping napalm, and another visit to Wonsan Harbor, where the New Jersey's 16-inch guns fired most of the night at approximately every 4.5 minutes. Cody timed them for a while, lying on his bunk wide awake, staring at the bottom of Reese's mattress. Then, in a letter from Cody's mom, there's a clipping from the Memphis newspaper about his high school friend, Charlie Rivers, being killed in Korea. He was in the Marine Reserves. Cody and Charlie used to have a tandem routine on the horizontal bar at Rainbow Lake swimming pool. Cody could clearly picture them doing the routine as tears streamed down his face. He cried, thinking about his friend who was now gone forever. 2 days later, Cody got another letter from his mom. This one had a clipping and a photo from the Memphis paper. The photo was of him standing with the guns in the background, wearing a helmet and a life jacket and holding the K-20 camera. His mother had an acquaintance who worked for that newspaper, and she was the one who had the picture and the article about him serving in Korea aboard the battleship New Jersey printed in that paper. Cody felt ashamed when he saw the clipping, and his thoughts reflected it. Hot stuff, huh? Like John Wayne, a hero now, serving in Korea like a movie star. No, it's a little different. They're shooting real bullets here, not movie star bullets. No phony baloney. People get killed here. My buddy Charlie is dead, man. Dead. I'll never see him again. What the hell am I doing here? I don't care anything about killing anyone. Just wanted a job, to be in the Navy and have a career doing something I was interested in, like photography. Buddha and Jesus are right. We should love each other, not kill each other. The next day, the chief had an important announcement to make. He was notified there was an overcomplement of photographers in the flag, and 2 of them had to be transferred out. He asked for volunteers, but no one was willing to leave of their own accord. Cody had strong feelings for Hiroko and was hoping to see her again, even if it meant getting lost looking for a house in Kamakura. Reese and the 2 other seamen were happy aboard the New Jersey and had no interest in leaving. The chief decided they would draw straws, and the 2 of the 4 who had the shortest straws would be transferred. Reese and Cody lost, or won, depending on how it was looked at. The next day, Cody and Reese were separately put on a bosun's chair and transferred by ropes and cables over a choppy sea onto a supply ship alongside the New Jersey. It was a thrill for Cody and Reese, comparable to a daring ride at an amusement park, and is something only a few Navy sailors experienced. They were told they'd return to Yokosuka, where they would then be sent to Yokohama and go aboard a troop ship bound for San Diego, where they would report for duty at the Fleet Air Photo Lab on the North Island Naval Air Base. Once aboard the supply ship, with his sea bag tucked away, Cody went topside and watched the battleship New Jersey fade away on the distant horizon. He thought of Mika, Hiroko, Buddha, First Class Shay, the ex-frogman who pointed to the billets on the blackboard, and Bill Quinley from Tech High. And he knew without a doubt that angels exist. There's a footnote. Bill Quinley's mother told Cody's mother at the office where they both worked that her only son, Bill, was missing in action in Korea. Cody and Bill Quinley's mutual friend, Ed, purposely flunked out of advanced training in Corpus Christi after learning the sad news about his buddy. That's the end of my short story, Angels. Hope you'll read the other stories in the same book. All of my fiction is on Amazon. Thanks for listening.